Hello, everyone. Today is Thursday of Holy Week, oftentimes called Mundey Thursday, because Jesus washes the feet of his disciples on Thursday of Holy Week. Now, this teaches us an important lesson. Here's the basis for what's going on. In verse 1 says that Jesus knew that the time had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. He knew that in a few short hours that he was going to be arrested, ridiculed, put on trial unjustly, and suffer pain and eventually die on the cross. He also knew, according to verse 2, that devil had already prompted one of his disciples, Judas, to betray him. Not only did Jesus know that, he also knew the rest of the disciples, when he was to be killed on the cross, would run away from him scared. And even Peter, one of his most trusted disciples, were going to curse him and disown him 3 times before his suffering was over. But knowing all this, in verse 1, he says, having his own, loved his own who are in the world, he now showed them the full extent of his love. Now, this is striking to me. Jesus knowing that devil is working hard against him, Jesus knowing his immediate future is pain and suffering, loved his own, and he showed them what true love really is. Now, this is a lesson that we need to take from what happened on Mundey, Thursday. Folks, I know we're going through some tough times. I know many of you guys are suffering. I know many of your parents are going through uneasiness and they're worried about what's happening next. And you know what? Devil is at work in our world right now. Maybe not always directly, but he's causing pain, strife, and anxiety and fearfulness. But just like Jesus, let us be people who loves people and not only loves them, but shows them what true love is. Here's a reason why Jesus was able to love even in the midst of attacks from the devil, even in the midst of imminent suffering. Verse 3 says, Jesus knew that the Father had put all these things under his power. That's right. Jesus wasn't fooled by the fact that he was going to suffer. He didn't take lightly the fact that devil was at work, but he had greater trust in the fact that Father had everything under his control. Now, as people who are Christians, we ought to have the same heart. We know that there's suffering. We know the devil is at work, but at the same time, we need to be sure that God has everything under control. So we don't have to concentrate on the upcoming suffering and difficulties, or we don't have to worry about what the devil is doing. We need to start doing God's business of loving people. So in verse 4, he says, Jesus got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped the towel around his waist. Now that's an appearance of a servant. That's what a servant does. Servant doesn't sit there and eat with the rest of the people. He serves during the meal. Servant doesn't put on his outer garment and take his position at the table. He takes off his outer garment, wraps a towel around his waist, and goes to work. ANCA family, we need to go to work. Let's love people as a servant that Jesus shows us to be. So after that, in verse 5, he poured water into the basin and he began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. I pray in this season of difficulties and hardships, because we are people who know that God has everything under control, we wash each other's feet and we serve people, even to the point of being humiliated, even to the point of maybe even dying like Jesus died on the cross. Verse 14, 15, 16, and 17 tells us why Jesus did these things. Verse 14 says, now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. He did it because he wanted us to do the same. He goes on, I have set an example that you should do as I have done for you. That's right. As we're living through Holy Week, as we remember the suffering, the death, and the resurrection of Jesus, what we need to do is not concentrate on the fearful thing that surrounds us or worry about the fact the devil is at work. But we need to follow Jesus' example and do what he's done for us. Jesus says, no servant is greater than his master. No messenger is greater than the one who sent him. We are his servants. He is our master. We are but messengers of his gospel. We are not greater than him. If Jesus did such things, if Jesus loved in the midst of difficulties and hardships, and while the devil was at work, we need to do the same. And Jesus says, when we do that, we will be blessed. I pray this blessing over us. As you know, we're reading through 1 Corinthians chapter 15, which is nicknamed the chapter of resurrection. Paul kind of piggybacks on what Jesus is saying. In verse 36 of chapter 15 of 1 Corinthians, it says, what you sow does not come to life unless it dies. That's the spiritual truth, isn't it? And unless we die to ourselves, there is no fruitfulness. Just like Paul says, in order for a seed to realize its potential, it needs to be buried, it needs to rot underground, and then completely be destroyed underground, and thereby becoming a tree that bears so much more fruit. In conclusion, Paul says in verse 42, so it will be with the resurrection of the dead. The body that is sown perishable, it is raised imperishable. It is sown in dishonor, it is raised in glory. It is sown in weakness, it is raised in power. Let us remember Jesus' example. He served and showed us how much he loved us, even to the point of death. And just like Paul says, the power of the resurrection is when we die to ourselves, when we let our perishable die, we will be raised imperishable. When we sow our dishonorable things, it will be raised in glory. When we sow our weaknesses, it will be raised in power. We are a powerful people. We are called to be eternal beings. Let us not concentrate on finite things of this world. Let us be people who follow the examples of Jesus, knowing difficulties are ahead, knowing that the devil is at work, yet because we know the Father has everything under control, let us wash others' feet. Let us become humble. Let us sow our lives so that, as Paul says, what is perishable will be raised imperishable. Our dishonor will become glory, and our weaknesses will become power. God bless you. I love you. I miss you. I will see you again tomorrow through video. Have a great rest of your day. I will talk to you again.